We are about to be joined by my guy Lance Taylor at the Lance Taylor 94.5 Jocks down in Birmingham. Let me know, Danny G, when he's ready to roll. He's good to go. LT, what's up, my man? Thanks for getting up early with us. You're down in Birmingham at Jocks, big station 94.5 down in Birmingham. What are you feeling like in terms of optimism on the college football front? And also, how important is it for so many people making a living for college football to be back in your state and in your city?
Well, I feel pretty good right now, Clay. I mean, it seems like yesterday was the first Monday we haven't had really anything negative going into the week. So, I feel like the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC are pushing on right now. Kind of a scary situation at NC State. But when you really start to look at these numbers, kind of like Alabama, and I want to get to a point that you asked me about businesses, because I don't know if you've seen that the Tuscaloosa mayor has basically shut down every bar until September 8th, which is really interesting. But, Alabama had 30,000 students and faculty and staff that were tested, and there were 531 confirmed positive tests. I mean, that's less than 1.5%. And I was just one of those when we started all of this testing, the massive amount of testings. I just thought, because this was a pretty contagious virus, that the number would be about 10% of people that tested positive. So I don't know about you, man. I mean, less than 2%, in a lot of these places, less than 1%. I think you deem that as a positive, don't you?
Well, I think it's also not just who's testing positive. Sorry, not just the number. It's who's testing positive. And these are all college kids, many of whom would never know that they were positive at all, but for the fact that they're being tested, right? So I think if you look at the numbers collapsing in Florida, Texas, Arizona, all the places that were otherwise in the midst of an outbreak, I think what we're starting to see is the same thing that happened in New York, where, and this is a lot of scientists, I would encourage you to go listen to everybody out there who's listening to us right now that is curious about this. I think we had a nearly 2-hour discussion. I'm going to play an excerpt from this week at some point with a guy named Ovik Roy, who was incredibly outstanding. He's an MIT and Yale medical graduate at breaking down all these numbers and why they matter and everything else. But the kids who are testing positive on college campuses are having less of an impact than they would if they had the flu. Most of them don't even know they have it. The average person would experience it, if they know they have it, as something like a minor cold. I mean, if anything, these are the people that we want to get sick, because that's how you get herd immunity. And herd immunity, it now appears, we may only need like 20% exposure across the country, and we're close to that already, in order for the benefits of herd immunity to start to set in. And I think personally that's what happened in New York. I think that's what's happened in the Northeast, and why many of those communities have maintained a low level of viral spread since then. It's because they've already gotten a lot of people who were susceptible to this virus. They've already been exposed to it. And I think that's what will happen in short order on these college campuses. I think, LT, it's what happened with the university, with Clemson and with LSU, for instance. I think those teams had it run through them really quickly, and now they basically have herd immunity among the team.
Well, 1 degree of separation. I did hear from a major college coach that when students did come back, when players came back months ago, get them together as quickly as possible. And basically
create herd immunity. It's like a chicken. Did you do chickenpox parties when you were a kid?
No, and I vaguely remember having the chickenpox back in the day.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a bigger deal, I guess, when you were a kid.
Well, look, chickenpox is more dangerous for young kids than the coronavirus is. But my parents.
Well, I was told, hey, you need to get this early. I
That's
guess
right.
Like your parents were. You don't want to get this when you're older.
It's a lot more deadly to you. Chickenpox is, and now we have a vaccine, thankfully. But it's a lot more deadly to you as an older person than it is as a younger person. And
as
so
any of these viruses.
Yeah, a lot of them. Yeah, and so you ended up. We were exposed to it intentionally. And so when I was a kid growing up in Nashville in the 1980s. We had chickenpox parties. Like, somebody would get it, and then other kids would come over and play with those kids because it was highly contagious. And your parents, at least back then, wanted to make sure that you got it at age, 4, 5, 6 years old, so that you didn't get it when you were 25 or 30 or older. And everybody got it at a young age, and it was intentional. And so I think that probably, I don't know that it was intentional, but I think it happened for a lot of college football teams. And I think those teams, like the Clemsons of the world and the LSUs of the world, are going to have a lot less significant issues throughout the season because they're going to be less likely to have outbreaks.
Well, I don't doubt that at all, but it is insane now that we've got, major SEC cities shutting down bars. And, the whole thing about that is it is the optics, and they want to get to college football. I mean, look, and I want college football played more than anyone, but I don't know if this is the right way to go about it. I don't know if you were watching the NBA playoffs, and they've had this campaign for this bar called Coogan's in New York City. And I've been to New York a bunch. I've never heard of Coogan's. But basically, Facebook has done this ad for smaller businesses that are really struggling during the pandemic, and they're barely able to keep their doors open. And a lot of places like Coogan's are going under. And I think, unfortunately, when you put these mandates that bars have got to close for multiple weeks because students are showing up, ultimately, these are going to be places that are going to be closing. They're going to be going out of business.
Yeah, look, I get it totally. I mean, look, I own a bar in downtown Nashville, a part of one, and we haven't been able to be open for months. And that's on Broadway for people out there listening who know downtown Nashville. We're literally right on the main drag across from Tootsie's in downtown Nashville. And I think the mayor of Nashville has done a disastrous job, frankly, trying to balance health and also the economy, which is what reasonably intelligent people need to be trying to do. You can't make a decision entirely based on the economy, and you can't make a decision entirely based on health. Reasonable people have to be able to balance competing interests. And I think there's a way to open back up many different businesses while also being healthy doing so. And I think that goes to the essence of what you're talking about, that they're dealing with right now in Tuscaloosa. But I think we still have like a 10 p.m. curfew basically for restaurants in Nashville, which makes no sense. Maybe it's 10:30 now. But I mean, I'm going out to dinner tonight with Whitlock and a couple of other people involved in our business. And it doesn't really impact me because I get up so early in the morning. But it's for these restaurants, to me, it's kind of crazy. Like, hey, you're not allowed. You have to have everybody out basically right around 10 o'clock, as if at 11 o'clock the virus is a vampire and it suddenly starts to become a lot more dangerous. I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense.
Well, back to the decision that Tuscaloosa made to shut down these bars until September 8th yesterday. If you're sitting in that room, I mean, let's just use logic. Okay, so we're going to shut the bars down where students can't go to the bars. But your ABC package stores are remaining open. So what do you think the students are going to do now that they can't go to bars?
They're going to have private parties. I mean, it's
right.
No doubt.
And they're going to be massive private parties. So these kids are the liquor, and then they're going to go back to these off-campus parties, and they're going to congregate even more. So, I mean, it's not like you're going to stop it. This is all about the PR and the optics. And unfortunately, some pictures were taken outside of some of these bars in Tuscaloosa and in Auburn. And, people are pointing fingers. Look at these evil people. Look what they'll do just to play football. And so now politicians have gotten involved. And now, unfortunately, a guy that's working a double to support his family is out of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this has been my argument since March. I mean, we shut down the nation without considering, I believe, what the overall impact of that shutdown was going to be from an economic perspective. And I think you're finally starting to hear people talk about, hey, maybe 40 million people losing their jobs also has some health consequences. Yeah, you think? All right, let's go to the actual on the field. The college football playoff announced that they will be meeting all the dates that they'll be meeting, and they'll be selecting a 4-team playoff on December 20th. If college football season happens, it's going to start. I don't think there's any doubt at this point that it's going to start. If the college football season happens, and if we get to the college football playoff, and I believe there's a good chance that we will if the leaders of college football be steadfast, do the Pac-12 and the Big Ten commissioners ever recover from their decision to shut down the season if the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC all play. And not only do they play, they get to the college football playoff and crown a champion.
It's going to be tough. I mean, you look at maybe the most ridiculous poll of all time, the AP poll that was released yesterday. 9 teams are going to be one and done. I mean, we talked about this on the show yesterday. Ohio State's going to have the biggest fall in poll history, going from number 2 to completely out of the poll.
Yep.
Now I guess it's going to be a much easier decision for this committee because they've only got 76 teams to choose from.
Yep.
But, yeah, if you're able to play the entirety of the college football season and you just think about the massive amount of money that will be made for the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, it's going to be a bad look for both the Pac-12 and the Big 10.
Does this feel like a season where every coach, assuming he's not doing something, nefarious with the coronavirus-related issues, everybody survives to the next year? Because when you play 10 conference games like the ACC and the SEC are doing, and certainly when you play in an aberrational like environment where you're not going to have huge home field advantages and everything else, it feels like it's going to be hard to fire somebody coming out of a season like this.
No, I see your point. I think it is going to be really difficult. But, another thing that we did bring up, and we do our Guaranteed Friday, where we do 3 guarantees of the college football season, and that's coming up this Friday. Well, one of my guarantees is going to be in the SEC. You're going to have 2 0-10 teams.
Yeah.
And that's going to be Arkansas that's going to face 7 top 25 teams.
Yeah, it's the most brutal schedule of all time Arkansas has got.
It is, and obviously Sam Pittman in year 1, he's going to be absolutely fine, but they're going to be underdogs in all 7, double-digit underdogs in all 7 of those games. They're going to be underdogs in all 10 of their games. I think they go 0-10. They've already lost 19 consecutive SEC games. So think about that. Arkansas and Bobby Petrino back in 2011, in this decade, had them a game away from playing possibly for a national championship. Now, there's a good chance they lose 29 consecutive conference games. But on the other side, right there in your city, Derek Mason is coming off a fresh 3-9. He's got a new athletics director. If he is to go 0-10, and they're going to be underdogs in all 10 of their games because, unfortunately, for Arkansas and Vanderbilt, they don't play each other. 0-10 is going to be really difficult, in my opinion, for for Derek Mason to survive that. Now, I could be completely wrong there, but I think there is a possibility 0-10 could get him run.
Yeah, you might be right, but I tend to think it's an interesting question. I tend to think it's going to be a pass-like season where nobody really wants to kind of bring the hammer down on anybody for a result. NFL, how crazily positive is it that they have had over 58,000 tests recently? I know they had 77 false positives, which is its own story that I think deserves to be investigated because how many other people out there have had false positives? But over 58,000 player tests, not one positive between August 12th and August 20th. That's pretty impressive for the NFL.
No, I think it is. It's pretty awesome, and I think a lot of these players, it shows you they're taking it seriously. And I don't know if you watch Hard Knocks anymore, and the only reason I'm actually watching is because I'm a Rams fan, and I hate that they're sharing this with the Chargers. But episode 1, they'll be on episode 3 tonight, was all about COVID testing. And you've got guys like Anthony Lynn, the head coach of the Chargers, that had it, and then Sean McVay just talking about you've got to be vigilant, you've got to be accountable for the guy next to you, and they keep pointing to the Marlins and that outbreak. And I think that outbreak, I think it did help because I think it really got people aware of the situation. One bad decision can lead to, multiple cases. So I think it's awesome the NFL has been able to keep these numbers down. And I think it shows you, man, the NFL's playing.
Oh, yeah, the NFL's playing. I don't think there's any doubt at all. And we're 16 days from the first game in the NFL between the Texans and the Chiefs. How much NBA are you watching, and what did you think of Luka's performance?
A ton. I was talking to Danny G before I came on with you here, and I'm a big Lakers guy as he is, and the bubble for me. I know the ratings are down, but I've enjoyed it. Luka had the discussion the other day. If you're taking one player right now, Giannis, is it Giannis or Luka
for like the next 10 years or how long?
Yeah. If you're building a franchise right now for the next 10 to 15 years. I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those guys.
I think they're the two. I think they're the only two that you could really legitimately consider if you're going for 10 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I lean Luka, and it's not just because I just saw that performance, because you look at Giannis yesterday, 31, 15, and 11.
Yeah.
And he is a 7-footer that can absolutely do everything. But Luka's a 6'8" guy that can do absolutely everything, and his ability just to see the entire court and how much better he makes his teammates. And just imagine when Giannis hits free agency, if he decides not to stay in Milwaukee, what if he goes to Dallas?
Oh, that would be amazing to watch the two of them play. I would go Luka because he's 4 years younger. So if you're going for a decade, Luka is going to be 31 in a decade, which is still relatively young from a basketball perspective. And meanwhile, you would have Giannis, who would be 35. So I think Luka, if you had to pick anybody right now in all of the NBA to start a team with for the next decade, I think Luka would have to be your guy. What do you think about the Lakers? They're obviously, I'd be stunned if they don't win Game 5 and move on to the second round. Is it still, in your opinion, going to come down to Lakers-Clippers for the NBA Finals?
Yeah, it probably should. Another thing that we talked about, and this was brought up in the broadcast last night when the Lakers jumped up early in the first quarter, this looks like the Lakers pre-bubble. And, they had won 8 of 10. They had just beaten the Clippers when everything was shut down. And I said, it just feels like this is going to be the year for LeBron and AD to get on the same page. And I think ultimately the Lakers are going to win this championship, and they probably beat the Bucks in the NBA Finals. And then, we go on the hiatus, and when we come back to the bubble, they just didn't look like the same team. And obviously, A.B. Bradley not coming back, Rondo not being healthy. They couldn't defend the three. They couldn't shoot the three. Last night, 17 of 39 behind the arc. Danny Green actually showed up last night. Kuzma was really good off the bench. And I think it did help that, Damian's not the same player right now with that dislocated left index.
I don't think there's any doubt at all. LT, appreciate it, my man. We'll talk to you next week, hopefully.
See you, Clay.